The winter wind sliced through Caleb's old barn as he rummaged through his dead partner's forgotten sea chest. Inside a tattered coat, his calloused fingers found a yellowed envelope sealed with wax and crumbling with age. He unfolded the brittle paper, and the ink still held the desperate weight of a dying man's final plea. Elias had written, "If my Rose ever falls into bondage, promise me you'll buy her freedom, no matter the cost." Caleb's blood ran cold because he had never kept that promise, having forgotten it entirely until this very breath. He saddled his horse and rode hard toward the mining town, a 20-year-old vow burning a hole through his chest. The town square was crowded with vultures when he arrived, an auction block erected where a church once stood. A woman stood on the platform, her wrists bound, her auburn hair matted, her eyes staring at a distant nothing. The auctioneer bellowed that she was indentured for debt, her body sold to the highest bidder for $400. She was Elias's daughter, Rose, and the years had carved a map of suffering across her once beautiful, hollow face. Caleb recognized the curve of her jaw, a ghost of her father's stubborn chin, and his heart fractured completely. A saloon owner waved a wad of cash, and the gavel rose to seal her fate in a brothel. Caleb's voice thundered across the square, shouting $450, every last cent he owned in this world. The crowd turned, stunned, as the grizzled rancher pushed forward and emptied a leather pouch of silver and gold coin. The auctioneer shrugged, the saloon owner cursed, but the law was clear. The highest bidder owned her debt outright. Rose looked at Caleb with a mixture of fear and confusion, unable to comprehend why a stranger would buy her misery. He walked to the block, cut her ropes with a skinning knife, and whispered, "Your father sent me, Rose." Her legs buckled, and he caught her, lifting her onto his horse as the crowd parted in bewildered silence. They rode through the night to his ranch, a sanctuary of open pastures and the sound of a gentle creek. He placed her in the spare room, built a fire, and left a wool dress on the bed without a word. For the first 3 days, she didn't speak, just sat on the porch and watched the horizon like a wounded hawk. He brought her meals, hot coffee, and sat nearby without demanding anything, respecting the vast cavern of her silence. On the 4th morning, she finally spoke, asking why he had paid such a fortune for a ruined woman's worthless hide. Caleb handed her the yellowed letter and watched her face as she recognized her father's elegant, trembling script. She read the promise aloud, her voice cracking, and when she finished, the tears finally came in a torrential flood. He told her that her father had saved his life in a cave-in, and this promise was his sacred debt. Rose wept for hours, and Caleb simply stayed, a solid presence as she released decades of pain and abandonment. The days turned into weeks, and she began to help with small chores, feeding chickens and mending torn saddle blankets. He taught her to ride again, gently, patiently, her laughter returning in small bursts like a timid spring wildflower. She discovered a talent for training the wild mustangs he captured, her quiet authority calming even the most terrified beasts. Caleb watched her in the corral, her hair loose, her commands firm but loving, and he felt something shift inside. She asked him one evening if he had ever been married, and he admitted he had been too busy forgetting promises. She touched his hand and said the man who remembered a dead man's vow was more husband than most living pretenders. That night, they sat under a canopy of stars, and he confessed that buying her freedom was his greatest act. She replied that his greatest act was giving her a reason to believe she was worth more than $400. The auction block felt like a distant nightmare, fading under the steady warmth of his unwavering, gentle presence each day. When a neighboring rancher insulted her past, Caleb's fist flew before his brain could catch up with his fury. He stood over the bleeding fool and declared that Rose was worth more than every acre of stolen land. She cleaned his knuckles that night, her touch tender, and told him he didn't need to fight her battles. He replied that a promise was not just words, but a lifelong commitment to shield her from any harm. Their first kiss happened in the barn, with the scent of hay and horse, and it tasted of redemption. She pulled back, afraid her brokenness would taint him, but he drew her close and refused to let go. He told her that her body had been sold, but her soul was never for sale, and he was buying nothing. Their love was a slow, deliberate construction, not a wildfire, but a stone foundation laid with trust and time. He built her a greenhouse for the herbs she loved, a glass palace where life could flourish under her care. She wrote her father's letter out in beautiful calligraphy and framed it above the mantel as a sacred relic. The saloon owner, bitter and vengeful, once tried to reclaim her by legal trickery, brandishing old debt papers in court. Caleb produced Elias's letter and a countersuit for unlawful enslavement, shaming the man into retreating with a permanent scowl. The judge, a rare honest man, declared the debt null and Rose a free woman with full legal rights restored. That afternoon, they rode to the highest ridge, and he knelt on the wild grass with a simple silver ring. He told her that he had fulfilled her father's promise, but now he was making his own, a vow of forever. She cried, nodded, and the wind carried her whispered yes across the entire sun-drenched valley below them. Their wedding was a simple affair, the preacher reading from Elias's letter as part of the ceremony's sacred text. The ranch hands, who had become her fierce protectors, wept openly and built them a new bed as a gift. Rose wore a crown of wildflowers, and Caleb thought she looked like the frontier itself, resilient, wild, and breathtakingly beautiful. They made a pilgrimage to Elias's grave, leaving a copy of the letter and a lock of her hair tied with ribbon. She thanked her father for sending a man who remembered, even when the man himself had forgotten for 20 years. Caleb placed his hand on the headstone and vowed silently to spend eternity making up for every lost, forgotten day. Their ranch prospered, not just in cattle, but in the safe haven they built for other broken, discarded souls. They took in orphan children, runaway indentures, and even former saloon women seeking a new, dignified, and purposeful life. Rose taught them all to read using her father's letter as the first lesson in the power of written promises. Caleb taught them to ride, rope, and stand tall against any man who tried to diminish their inherent worth. Their home became known as Promise Ranch, a sprawling sanctuary where chains were exchanged for deeds and second chances. Rose bore a daughter, and they named her Eliana, a blend of Elias and a promise he had set in motion. The child had her grandfather's stubborn chin and her mother's fierce, untamable, and beautiful spirit of survival. Caleb would rock her to sleep with the story of how a forgotten letter rebuilt a broken world entirely. Eliana grew up knowing that a person's worth is never determined by the auction block, but by the love they inspire. The yellowed letter was eventually donated to the Territorial Museum, encased in glass with the auction bill for $400. Visitors would weep at the display, the stark contrast between a cold transaction and a burning, sacred, and kept vow. Caleb and Rose grew old together, their hands always intertwined, their love a testament to honor's enduring architecture. She passed first, her final words a whisper that his promise had given her a life worth every second. He followed her within the week, some said from a broken heart, but truly from a satisfied, completed journey. They were buried side by side under the oak where he had proposed, a joint headstone carved with the word kept. Promise Ranch still stands, run by their descendants, a living monument to the weight of a forgotten word remembered. Eliana, now an old woman herself, tells the story to anyone who will listen, her voice trembling with pride. She says that $400 bought a body, but a promise held for 20 years resurrected a soul. The auction block is long gone, but the lesson endures. A vow, once made, can echo across decades and save. The world may price a person in cold coin, but love calculates worth on an entirely different, infinite scale. So keep your promises, even the ones you've forgotten, because someone's freedom might be waiting in a dusty old coat. Now please subscribe to Weston Taylor's Official and ring that bell so you never miss a story of redemptive honor. Tell me in the comments about a promise that changed your life or someone you hold dear. Like this video if you believe that a man's word should outlast empires and resurrect the shattered. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are worth infinitely more than any price tag. From the auction block to the highest ridge, this is the gospel of the kept promise, and it is yours. Go now and let your own forgotten vows rise from the dust to rewrite the broken stories around you. The paper may yellow, but a promise carved into a heart is the only currency that truly endures forever.